So we are in Philadelphia in front of the offices of Defined Hospitality. We're going to be talking to Al Lucas and Greg Root. That came on my radar by way of Eli Culp. Thank you again, Eli, being so generous through Network. I only give myself 1 hour before every episode to kind of familiarize myself with each restaurant group. And what excites me about talking to these two individuals, Greg and Al, is that they seem to be very operations oriented. At one point, they both held the title of Director of Operations for Starr Restaurant Group. So I'm assuming that they cross paths through Starr Restaurant Group. Stephen Starr is a kind of a legend here in Philadelphia. So it's always fun to see how success breeds success. And I'm curious to see how their strengths as two operation-geared individuals overlap. That's going to be really interesting. I'm interested in that. They have 6 concepts here in Philadelphia in this community. It seems to be an emerging community, so it'd be cool to kind of talk about how they got into this community and turning a community around. And I don't know if you guys can hear the screaming in the background, but I mean, they are on the edge of the city, and Philadelphia does kind of have a reputation for being in trouble as a city, so it's going to be interesting to get their perspective on how they're evolving and how they're lifting the city up. So I'm interested in that. 6 concepts: pizza, tacos, I think or just Mexican in general. Not really sure about those business models, so I'm going to pull back some layers. I'm excited for this. It's going to be good.
This episode is brought to you by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest partner at Defined Hospitality, Greg Root. My man, Greg, are you feeling unstoppable today?
So unstoppable.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited to be here. Eli Culp had amazing things to say about the folks here at Defined Hospitality, what you're doing. Your names were at the top of the list when he said you need to talk to. These are the people you need to talk to in Philadelphia. You guys were up there, and I've taken 4 hours of your time between you and Al today. So I just want to say personally, thank you guys for being so generous with your time. I cannot wait to get into your story, but let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with that success quarter mantra. What do you got for us?
All right, very, very quickly, it goes like this: don't fuck it up, but we're going to change it to don't mess it up, because it's a little more, 2023.
So why does that resonate with you? Why is that your quote?
So my, one of my mentors, Steve Lewis, who we'll talk about later, I'm sure, gave me that bit of advice early on when I was a young 21-year-old kid who came out of college and was working as the GM of a Burger King. And I asked him for a piece of advice, and he said, well, Greg, don't fuck it up.
So what do you think he was trying to communicate to you in that? Like, is it literally that simple? Just don't.
It was that simple, and don't mess up, what I've taught you along the way. And it meant a lot more, with the people, and obviously go in and learn everything you can learn, but don't mess it up. Don't be an idiot.
Got it. Simple, stupid, great way to get this thing started, man. I like it. And where does it make sense to start sharing your story? When did you know that this path, the hospitality path, was going to be your path?
Yeah. I have a pretty cool story. I'm pretty proud of how I stumbled along the industry. I grew up in an area called Orland, Pennsylvania, which is about 30 minutes outside of Philadelphia, and was very fortunate to have had 3 brothers, 2 older, 1 younger, and we were all caddies at this country club. Our house backed up to it on the 15th hole at a place called Manufacturers Country Club.
Ever sneak in a couple holes when no one's looking?
Oh, we had a backyard membership for sure. For sure. And, I started when I was 13 years old. So I'm 45 now, just turned 45. And I remember my first day up there, I did a job called running the hill. So again, 13 years old, like mini-me at the time. And the caddy master at the time, Bob Schoenig, who had a nickname for me, Rudy Tootie. But basically I took members' golf bags up and down the hill, the first tee, giant decline to the fairway, and every bag I got $1. So my first day there, I earned $33. 13-year-old kid. I literally ran home, however long it was, half a mile, 3/4 of a mile, ran home with such excitement, saw my parents. I said, I just made $33 here today.
Rich.
And they're like, okay, cool. Like, way to go. What are you doing tomorrow, kid? But Anyway, so I was a caddy early on, and I just loved the energy. I loved seeing the members and how they carried themselves. I loved seeing the staff of the country club, from the golf professionals to the kitchen crew to just the choreographed event that it was. And, fast forward about a year and a half, I was either 14 or 15. And I was carrying 2 bags at the time. A double looper is what they call them on the inn. And I was still micro in size. Really, haven't really hit the growth spurt, if you will.
They call you what? What was your nickname again? Something
Rudy.
Tootie? Rudy.
Rudy Tootie.
Rudy Tootie. Is there a story behind that?
Just my last name's Root.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was.
Kid of the 70s and 80s.
Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't overlooking a really great story.
No, nothing fancy there. Simple-minded people. And so I was about to leave. I think it was a Thursday, if I remember correctly, and I was about to leave because there were no loops. That's what we called them. There were no caddies, no members that needed a caddy that day. Well, at least I didn't get picked. And lo and behold, the caddy master at the time, Bob Schoenig, said, "Hey, Rudy, wait on. I have one member, a new member that just joined here. He needs a caddy. Seems like a really good guy. Owns about 40 Burger Kings in and around Philadelphia. His name is Steve Lewis. I think you'll like him." Okay, great. I meet him, and immediately when I shake his hand, I had this sense of just slight awe, but also calm, and like, I'm going to be around this guy a lot. I can tell.
What was it about him that made you feel this way?
His charisma and his character. You could just tell he cared about everyone that he came in contact with, and he was, he says this a lot, and I believe it, and he's a man of the people, and that's really what he is. A guy that did very well for himself and his family, but treats everybody with the utmost respect, and just wants the best out of everybody.
How well do you remember that first handshake?
Like it happened yesterday.
Explain it. Bring us like we're like right there witnessing it.
Well, he was on the first tee at Manufacturers, and there's like 4 steps or so leading down from the ledge where the caddies are down to the first tee. And I pick up his bag, and the bag's about him and his wife make fun of me because the bag was probably bigger than me at the time, and it was dragging around. He had to get a new bag the next day. That's all a joke, but. I just remember walking down and seeing this well-dressed man, and him. He was laughing, and he had his friend Lou Caputo there, who was his secretary's wife, and he had 2 other gentlemen. I forget who they were, but I just carried Steve's bag, and everybody else rode for the day. But the interaction with Steve at the first tee, I just remember. He just looked me in the eye and said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Hi, I'm Greg." More like, "Hi, I'm Greg." And he said, "Greg, how you doing? Nice to meet you. I'm Steve, and this is Lou." And then he boom, 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 boom. And, all along the way, there was also, it wasn't, walking down the first tee in the first fairway, I was that little inquisitive kid just asking all these questions of Steve. What do you do? Where are you from? Blah, 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 all the things that I always do. And, he got that sense of curiosity from me as well, but he also at the same time, if I did something wrong, hey, no, Greg, what are you doing? Over here, because he knew that I was a newer caddy to carrying 2, but I was only carrying 1 for him at the time. But he knew he had to kind of mentor and train me in the caddying sense too. And turns out he really mentored me in life and in restaurants.
So how long would you say he was a mentor for you?
I talk to him all the time.
Nice.
Yeah,
I love that.
Haven't talked to him in a while. Sorry, Steve. But
so was he? Why? What was it about this experience and working with him, caddying for him, that made you just fall in love with hospitality?
Yeah, it was the 5th hole at Manufacturers on that first day that I realized that I was going to be in the restaurant business. I don't know why I remember it was the 5th hole. It was just, we were having a back and forth, and it was a little bit of him and a little bit of me and a little bit of his golf, and he's a good golf player. And I just remember the way he carried himself, his charisma, his attitude, and again, like I just said, it's how he treated people. I just said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be what he does. And I've always, I can't explain what was inside of me, that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, that I felt that I was going to be an entrepreneur, that I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. It just was in me. And I knew I'm going to do this one day.
I will say this about country clubs. They are probably where I'm taking a stab in the dark. You don't have to agree with this statement, but I think that they're probably where hospitality exists, the greatest amount of hospitality right now in the industry. And in my opinion, it's because of the relationships are so consistent, where like you can really go above and beyond to make people feel seen and welcome because you develop relationships. Like these people are coming every day, every night. And it's like their whole families and like, and I just feel like working there. I mean, I've worked in a lot of segments in the hospitality industry, and for me, it was a country club. It was in my mid-20s. I worked like a little, like, it was like a shack basically. I wanted like the
halfway house.
Halfway house, exactly. Yeah. And it was just so cool to like, you start to like learn your clients, and like you start to see their habits and their preferences, and it was just so easy to get ahead of that because you're like, I know exactly what this person's going to ask for. They're so predictable, and it's just so easy to go above and beyond and to make people feel seen and welcome because the quality, the depth of the relationship is so much deeper. I feel like than in other verticals. Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that. And when you said let's get ahead of that, that's my other mantra that I forgot to mention, but that's a well-known ism of mine that I say a lot.
Yeah,
let's get ahead of it.
There's this one guy, and it sticks out, and he would order the same thing every time. I saw that he was playing the back nine that day, so I wasn't going to see him. And the cool thing also about that is like you have a list. You know who's teeing off, what time they're going to be there. Right. So you know exactly who's coming, what to expect. You can really get ahead of it. And I was like, oh, crap, I'm not going to see this dude. I like this guy. I got my golf cart, and I went to like the 10th hole. And I was like, hey, I know you're not going to be able to get your Pepsi today, so I wanted to bring it to you here at the 10th hole because I know you always get it. And he's just like, I blew him away, you know? And I feel like you can do that in country clubs. Like something about the environment, the predictability of it, really lets you go above and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for a lot of people, you know, it's a reprieve from their normal work week, and they get to come in there and, you know, they're spending a lot of money on the ability to play golf or tennis or just eat at the restaurant or swim, what have you. But to your point, you know, the ability of the folks working there to provide that hospitality experience and knowing those little details about X, Y, or Z person is everything, right? I mean, I play golf a lot still now, and the experiences that I have with the folks that work there are great. You know, they know what I do, of course, but it's they ask about my kids, how your kids doing, how, you know, what's up with the wine list, how you doing with the mezcal list over at Condesa. You know, that level of questions certainly resonated with me and helped me out in the career now.
And we're 10 minutes into this conversation and we're still talking about your first job as a caddy.
I have more.
I would take 3 hours for my guests if they'd give it to me, but it's hard enough to lock down a restaurant for 2 hours, man. But I'm loving the conveation, and I don't see caddy on your LinkedIn profile for whatever reason.
I left it off. I don't know. No.
So the first thing I see is in 2002. Jones's.
Yep. Well, here we'll go backwards really quickly if that's okay. So out of college, so I was working with Steve Lewis. He owned a bunch of Burger Kings. He owned a little chain called Eastside Mario's, Ribbit Ribs. He had a couple other, you know, smaller franchises, and you know, I knew I was going to work in that business, and so, you know, I did my little senior internship with him at his office, which was great, and I also went into some of the fast food and chain restaurants and loved every second of it. Applied to 2 colleges, Widener University and Indiana University, Pennsylvania, and got into both, but barely got into IUP and barely got out. It's a whole thing. They said, yeah, you're in, you're good. Why don't you come in the summer and take some classes before the fall? I said, okay, is this summer school? What are we doing here? But no, it was a great experience for me at IUP. I studied restaurants, played in the golf team for a couple of years, and got out of IUP after 4 years. You know, my dad, another mentor of mine, my dad said, you know, I'll take care of the first 4 years of school. Any year after that is on you, kid. Okay, all right, good. So that's enough motivation for me.
That's a pretty good deal, though.
Yeah. Well, I went to state school. It was I don't know, maybe $11,000 back then, from 96 or 2000 to 2004.
So were you working at Burger King's?
I got out of college, and so my dad will tell you this too. I got out of college, and at graduation ceremony, my one professor came up to my family and said, "Well, Greg, congratulations. It's been great to you know, teach you," and so on and so forth. What are you going to do now? And I said with such excitement, I'm going to be the general manager of a Burger King.
What'd you go to school for again? Remind me if you were
Restaurant management.
Nice.
And restaurant and hotel management. And I was just so proud because I was going to go work with Steve Lewis, and a mentor of mine and a friend of mine, and I knew that I was going to learn from him. And at the time I said, well, I'm going to buy Burger Kings. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to learn from him, and then I'm going to turn around and make this my career and make it into a company that I want to start.
But I think there's there's almost like a stigma around franchises and corporations, especially with the young, I think, romanticized individuals who think, like they're going to do a brand new menu every day, and it's going to be like, that's beautiful. Don't get me wrong. It's also really challenging. It's hard to make that profitable too, and I think there's a lot to be learned about going early into a career where there's rigid systems, processes, procedures, organization. I think we don't give it enough credit. It's almost like people see it as being soulless. But at the same time, it's how you make this industry profitable.
Right. 1,000%. I liked working in fast food. I didn't love it, but it certainly taught me a great deal about what I did. And I was going through some stuff at the time, and my mother was sick, and kind of going downhill fast. So I wasn't in a great mental space at the time. But, I look back at my time everywhere and any job that I had, as I learned a ton, and I'm so grateful for where I worked and what I did, because all of the people that took the time to show me along the way, that's why I'm here and luckily doing what I love.
So how long were you there for?
At Burger King?
Yeah.
Or IEP?
Burger King. I guess yeah.
Yeah, no. Burger King, I was only there for about a year or so, year and a half. And then I went to another chain restaurant after that and went to a place called Pizzeria Uno, and also learned, a great deal of structure, company structure, and how to get the most out of the workforce. And, again, this was in 2000 and 2001. So much different time than now on what restaurants are like. And this is both experiences were outside of the city. One was in Conshohocken, I think, and then the one in Westchester. And, I learned a lot. Really, when I went from Burger King to Pizzeria Uno, I really realized the effect of the staff and how much how much they contribute to the overall experience for the guest, and how, as a manager and as a leader, I have to be great and be consistently great too.
So what was it that pulled you away from the franchise model or the corporate model?
You mean from Pizzeria Uno?
Yeah, well, Burger King, Pizzeria Uno, and then from there, I see that you're at Jones's. And that's not
well, I went from Pizzeria Uno to Starr Restaurants, I left Pizzeria Uno and didn't really know what I was going to do, and I don't know, I was 20.
Oh, so Jones's is the first restaurant. I see now under the Starr.
Under Starr Restaurants. Yeah.
Years. So that's a really great. I feel like that's a great path.
I have a funny story about that too.
Okay, get into
I have a lot of funny stories, but
yeah. So what was going on? Why were you disillusioned with the corporate life?
No, I just didn't like it. It was not. Again, mother was still sick at the time and kind of going through that, and I just said, you know what, I need a little break, and I left that place. And I remember I faxed my resume into Starr Restaurant Organization.
You're dating yourself.
FAX, fax, and I sent it in, and I said, well, they're not going to reply to me because I have Burger King and Pizzeria Uno on my resume, for Christ's sake. This is, Starr Restaurants, the preeminent restaurant group in Philadelphia at the time, and, very much looked up to in that regard still. And I got a call from a young lady, Michelle Wagner, maybe Michelle Camarda at this time. And she was in charge of HR at the time, and, we had a phone interview. And I remember I was on the beach in Avalon, New Jersey at the time, just kind of down there on a weekend with some buddies of mine, and had a call with her. And then after about 7 interviews, I got hired from Starr Restaurants. 2 of them were with Steven. And, I knew I was going to have to interview with him a couple times. I knew he'd look at my resume and be like, what the heck's going on
here? You also you came in as a manager, which I think was a statement too.
Yeah.
So what did they ever tell you what it was about you and your interview and your resume that appealed to them?
Not in the moment, but Al told me, Al Lucas, my business partner now, friend, mentor, and just overall good guy. You know, he was the one that really hired me in 2002. I think he was director of restaurants, or that was his title then. But he said he fought for me with Steven because of, I guess, you know, character, family life, and upbringing, and so on. And you know, after fast forward about 13 and a half years, I was the longest tenured person in Starr Restaurants. Wow. in operations, you know, minus a few people that were in the back office.
So why are those things, family life, tenure, not tenure, but you said family life, what were the other reasons?
Family life, character, yeah.
How did he know that? I mean, how did this manifest in the interview?
I don't know. I think it probably came out in my values and my orientation on my values and what it means to, you know, treat people the way you want to be treated, and have respect for everyone and everything going on, and understanding the good in people. You know, I think that it was values oriented.
You spent 13 years and 5 months with Starr Restaurant Group from 2002 to 2015. And then in 2016, you opened your own place, to Fine Hospitality. This is, I don't think I've ever had anybody on the show who's, I mean, you also worked with, you know, 2 other restaurant groups, Uno and Burger King before that. We're going to be able to go deep, man. We're going to be able to go year by year with this and really talk about your evolution. So, I mean, what was it like when you first got hired?
I remember being so proud that I just got hired from, like I said earlier, the preeminent restaurant team in Philadelphia. And I said, I'm just going to go after it and do the best job that I can and learn the most that I can. And when I tell you I didn't know anything about like the food side of the business, I didn't even know what mirepoix was at the time. And, you know, I remember Bradley Bartram, he was the culinary director of Starr Restaurants at the time. You know, I walked in day 2, I'm on the pass, you know, I'm learning how to expedite. And he goes, well, we make this with mirepoix. And I'm like, what the hell's mirepoix? What are you talking about, dude? And so he told me obviously what it was. And
how did they handle you? Were they like, did they scoff at you? Were they like, oh,
no, they didn't, because Jones was a comfort food restaurant. You know, it was not meant to be a fancy restaurant. You know, they may have scoffed at me at other restaurants, and I certainly got that along the way.
After you walked away from the past.
Yeah, probably. But I don't care. But that's another mantra. You know, I didn't really care what people said. I just knew that I was going to go in and learn the most that I could.
Yeah, but there's also an underlying lesson here that there's no place for pretension in the restaurant industry. And if you create that culture,
anymore.
Yeah, and it seems like the Starr Restaurant Group knew this really early on. Maybe not, I don't know. But to have that culture, or maybe it was just this individual who at that moment just, you know, knows that that's not going to make you feel less is not going to help you or the organization. Right. So you go back to that moment. You're at the pass. You're doing expedite.
Yeah, and I just remember Bradley saying, you know, we make this with mirepoix. I'm like, what the heck is this? And he told me, and I just remember that level of care that he had at the time for. I mean, I was 25 years old.
I was an asshole.
You know, I didn't know anything from tomorrow, and he took the time to show me. And you know, I think at the time, Starr Restaurants had 6 or 7, maybe 8 restaurants, and I just remember feeling part of the group in that sense. And, you know, learned a lot of lessons along the way, you know.
What was your evolution like? Your evolution working with like this, like one of the most well-known restaurateurs in the country, let alone in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's still going on, my evolution in the restaurant biz. But I know, you know, looking backwards at that age, I was, you know, young and hungry, and I still feel young and hungry to try to fight every day to get the best out of everyone and the best out of everything, and serve the best food, the best beverage, the best hospitality. But my evolution was, you know, as you can probably imagine, I was a young, inexperienced kid trying to learn everything I can, and kind of got my own way sometimes too.
So that was your struggle, your challenge. How'd you overcome it? And give me an example of how you get in your own way.
Well, I would, you know, maybe make a mistake and say too much, or
what do you mean?
I remember early on at Jones, and you know, one of the lessons that my father taught me along the way when I was a kid was, you know, treat people the way you want to be treated. And I remember there was a server at Jones, and I said something to her, and she looked at me in a way like, how could you say something like that to me? And it wasn't anything egregious. It was just like hey, come on, let's go. But I remember saying that, and then I talked to my father later that night, and he said, well, it doesn't sound like you treated her like she wanted to be treated. And that moment right there changed me, and how I spoke with and communicated with folks that I work with. Because everybody, at the end of the day, everybody tries to do a great job and wants to do a great job. And with that, and with the understanding that everybody's a human being and they have a lot of things going on inside and outside of work, coming together and doing it together is the special, is the special part.
I mean, it's really early to get woo-woo, but I'm going to go there anyway. But, no, there's a lot of science. I literally, and it's top of mind for me because I just finished interviewing today Tom Sterner, the author of It's Just a Thought. He has a couple other books out, too. Mm-hmm. But his most recent is Just a Thought. And the whole idea of he gets into that book about, I don't know if you follow the idea of quantum physics and just this idea of consciousness and how consciousness is singularity. Does any of this ring a bell? The words I'm using right now?
It involves a book, so no.
So it's just this idea that we share consciousness, and it's not just you and
Human
me,
beings,
but if you believe in aliens, it's
right.
The one thing that connects all life on Earth and in the universe is awareness. Life is aware, and we all share this consciousness. And I sometimes wonder if literally the way that we might have different beliefs and values and perspectives, but the way that we experience life is literally the same. I think in terms of quantum physics, how I experience the world in terms of what my feelings are. At the end of the day, we all just want the same things, to be respected, right?
Yeah.
And
to do a great job and have a great life.
And to treat others the way you want to be treated is just such an easy way to would I want this? How would I feel if somebody was talking to me like this?
Exactly.
It's just such an easy way to simplify all of that.
Yeah. And I've, my whole career, I've tried to keep things simple and not to get too complicated with items. I mean, kind of a thing for my father, he was always very, he still has some one-liners that are very, simple, but, he's like, either you're going to like it or you're not going to like it. And I know that's, something silly for me to say, but it kind of brings you backwards a little bit and slows you down and has you understand big picture. It's really not that big of a deal.
So the first, I would say from 2000, so 2 years and approximately 3 years of your time with Starr, you were manager and assistant manager, and then you evolved, eventually got your general manager position.
Correct.
It looks like you're a general manager under multiple concepts for 1, 4, 5, 6 years. Yeah.
So Jones, then Continental Midtown. I was the
pod
manager. Yep. AGM. And then I went to Continental Old City to be the GM there. I was the second GM. There was a guy named Richard Roberts who was the long-standing 11-year opening GM of Stephen's First Restaurant and Stephen's best friend at the time. And I took over Continental Old City as the GM when I was 27 or 28. And again, I kind of got my own way and wanted to take care of everything and clean the place up physically and make sure we were doing everything correctly and kind of standard bearer and kind of got my own way a little bit there too. Learned from my
standard bearer,
wanted to keep things. They were a little loose there, right? From my comfortability from a hospitality standpoint, and I'm a kind of I like to control things a little bit, which is okay.
It's good if you're a manager.
Yes. Well, yes. And as long as it's channeled too, right? And so I went in there and got a little too guns a-blazing, if you will.
So when was this? Which restaurant?
That was Continental Old City.
So
and then after that, I went to
Pod.
No, that's before Pod.
Before Pod. Okay.
Yeah, so Continental Midtown and Continental Old City are two separate restaurants. So I went to Continental Old City, and then I went to Pod, which is in University City, and that's a Pan-Asian restaurant.
So let's hover over Continental for a second. So the lesson here was you can't go guns a-blazing and command and control. That's what you were doing. What happened?
Well, I didn't gain the respect from everyone, right? I went in expecting it. And I had to
expecting respect.
Yes, and I had to gain it, and I had to listen to myself and listen to everyone else. My thing most of my career and still to this day is work harder than anybody else, and be on the ground and be talking with everyone and learn everything I can. But I was still doing that, but I was just not creating the relationships that I really needed to create in the moment so that I could properly lead the team.
How did you know you didn't have their respect?
Just the look on their face. they didn't, some of them didn't like me, some of them didn't respect me. And yeah, I just, learned some big life lessons there on how to truly slow down and learn from myself and learn from others that are doing it and that know more about it than I do. And I have to, I was, a lot of my career, I was also the youngest GM, youngest director, youngest blah, blah, blah.
So how did you evolve as a professional to go from a manager that has no respect, you're in there, your command, your control?
I wouldn't say no respect.
Well, you know what I'm saying, but you needed some respect, right?
Right.
How did you get that? What was the tipping point? Like, when did things start to shift for you?
I mean, it just conversations with my mentor, Steve Lewis, my father, Al Lucas too. Just conversations and reaching out to my friends and mentors and saying, not being afraid to tell them of some potential failures that I had, and not being afraid of what they may think about me, and always have the tenacity to be great. And I knew through my relationship with them that I could reach out to them and there would be no ill feelings or, hey, what the hell, knock it off. It was there was still care on their end to listen to me and to provide direction.
So do you remember this conversation when you went to Steve Lewis and you're like, Steve, like,